You have 48 hours to release our people and surrender your dominion over Earth's colonies, or we will dismantle your empire piece by piece. The transmission ripped through the Galactic Empire's encrypted networks like a silent detonation. Every high-ranking official, every fleet commander, every intelligence node received the message on a frequency they were never supposed to detect. There was no warning, no chance to block it. At the center of the broadcast stood Admiral Dain Voss, his presence unshaken, his voice as steady as the inevitability of war. His uniform bore no unnecessary decorations, no elaborate insignias, only the stark black of Earth's resurgence fleet, reborn in secret. Behind him, through the Resolute's primary viewport, humanity's fleet loomed in disciplined silence. The black ships, once dismissed as decommissioned relics, had returned, transformed into engines of war. "Admiral, no response from the Empire," said Taver Jin, his sharp, calculating eyes scanning the laser plasma display. Dain remained unmoved. "They think silence buys them time. That's their mistake." Taver hesitated for half a second. "Are we certain they understand the consequences?" Dain didn't look away from the screen. "They will." The countdown had begun. The High Council chamber seethed with indignation. "Humans?" a minister spat, his scaled features twisting in disbelief. "Delivering ultimatums as if they are equals." Another, a towering figure draped in ceremonial armor, scoffed. "Let them bark. They do not possess the strength to bite." High Chancellor Vorak Thalen sat in silence, fingers clasped before him, gaze fixed on the frozen image of Admiral Dain Voss. Unlike his advisors, he did not dismiss the message outright. He did not laugh. He studied the human's expression, cold, detached, calculated, absolute certainty. "Chancellor," a voice interrupted, urgent but hushed. "Reports from the outer colonies indicate abnormal ship movements. Entire sectors have gone silent." Vorak's fists clenched. His next words were a whisper, but they cut through the noise like a blade. "They're already here." "Admiral, 47 hours remaining," Taver reported. "The Empire's fleet is shifting. Defensive positions near their core systems." Dain exhaled slowly, studying the battle display. "Then they're leaving their outer sectors exposed." He turned to Draylen Kane, the fleet's chief tactician. "We strike first. Hit their supply chains, cripple their logistics, sever their communications. By the time they react, they'll be cut off from their own empire." Kane's fingers hovered over the controls. "Confirmed targets?" Dain marked 3 points on the map. "Colony hubs, resource depots, relay stations. We take away their ability to coordinate and they crumble." Kane exchanged a glance with Tavor. No words were needed. A silent confirmation passed between them. The black ships engaged their drives, slipping into the void, their trajectories vanishing into encrypted data streams. Then, "Admiral," Kane said, a note of unease creeping into his tone. "Unidentified vessel detected, outer rim, just beyond our sensor range." Dain's gaze sharpened. "Empire?" Kane's hands moved quickly across the console. "Number unknown energy readings. Not standard Imperial technology." Taver frowned, leaning over the display. "It's not moving aggressively, it's just observing." Dain's jaw tensed. "Then let it watch. We're not here for them. We're here to end a war." Vorak's eyes narrowed as he studied the readings. The humans had moved, but something else lurked at the fringes of the battlefield. Not Imperial. Not human. "What are they doing?" he murmured. No answer. "Deploy interceptors," Vorak ordered. "Do not engage. Just observe." One of his admirals hesitated. "Chancellor, if the humans and this entity interact, the consequences could be—" Vorak cut him off. "They are already beyond our control." Tavor's voice carried a new tension. "Admiral, that ship just moved." Dain turned, watching as the unidentified vessel altered course. Its movements were deliberate, controlled. Not toward the Empire, not toward Earth's fleet. It was heading for something else. Kane's fingers flew across the interface. It's scanning something. A ripple appeared on the battle display, a gravitational distortion deep within uncharted space, an anomaly. Taver exhaled. That's no random fluctuation. That's a structure. The alien ship's core pulsed. Once, twice. "Admiral," Kane said, quieter this time, "it's interacting with something. Something old." Dain's grip tightened. So that's why they were here. The Empire thought Earth was their greatest enemy. They were wrong. Dain turned to his crew, voice calm, unyielding. "We have 46 hours left." Taver and Kane straightened, their focus sharpening. Across the bridge, officers moved with renewed urgency, finalizing fleet movements, preparing for engagement. The moment was quiet. Not hesitation, readiness. Dain spoke again, voice even unwavering. "Prepare for war." The countdown continued. 46 hours left. Dain Voss stood at the Resolute's command deck, eyes locked onto the laser plasma display. The unidentified vessel lingered near the Anomaly, its dark, fluid-like structure shifting against the backdrop of distant stars. It hadn't fired a shot. It hadn't transmitted a message, but it was doing something. "Admiral, incoming analysis," Drellin Kane reported. His fingers worked rapidly over the controls, filtering through the data. "That ship isn't just observing the anomaly, it's interacting with it, generating pulses, matching the energy signatures." Dain didn't look away. "Purpose?" Kane shook his head. "Unknown. But whatever it's doing, it's deliberate." Dain's mind sharpened. This wasn't a random encounter. The Empire had dismissed the anomaly as uncharted space, but someone else hadn't. And now, Earth's fleet had unknowingly stepped into the middle of something far older than their war. "Monitor it," Dain ordered. "No engagement unless provoked." Taver Jin's voice cut in. "Admiral, strike teams are ready. All ships report green across the board." Dain turned from the anomaly. The mission came first. "Then we begin," he said. "Launch the assault." The station hung in orbit around a barren world, its spires gleaming under the artificial light of planetary refineries. It was a keystone, a logistical hub connecting 3 major Imperial sectors. Its destruction wouldn't just be a loss, it would fracture their supply lines. The black ships emerged from darkness, their approach undetected. Cloaking fields dissolved as targeting systems locked in. On board the station, alarms blared. Imperial officers scrambled, their voices clashing as they tried to piece together what was happening. A security commander barked orders. "Where did they come from? Raise the defense grid!" Too late. Railguns fired first. Titanium slugs, moving faster than thought, tore through the station's primary hangar. Fire bloomed into the void as docking clamps shattered, sending supply freighters tumbling into nothingness. EMP warheads detonated next. A pulse of energy cascaded through the station, shorting out key systems. Lighting flickered. Shields collapsed. The defense grid died before it could even respond. Inside the control center, officers fought to regain order. "Systems failing!" "Backup power offline." "Comms are down. We can't—" Then, the final strike. The Resolute's plasma cannons opened fire, beams of searing energy slicing through the station's hull. The structure buckled, metal folding in on itself before igniting in a violent explosion. Kelrith Station was gone. The first piece of the Empire's infrastructure had fallen. Vorak Thalen watched the destruction unfold on the laser plasma display, his expression locked in cold restraint. Around him, his council erupted into chaos. "This is a direct assault. They never had this capability before. Their fleet should have been eradicated years ago." Vorak's gaze stayed on the remnants of Kelrith Station, now nothing more than cooling debris. He knew what the others refused to accept. The humans had moved beyond defiance. This was eradication. "Chancellor," An aide approached, his reptilian features tight with unease. Intercepted transmissions indicate coordinated strikes across multiple sectors. The black ships are not acting alone. Vorak finally turned, his voice a controlled whisper. Show me. New data illuminated the room. Supply lines severed, relay stations burning, fleets repositioning in response to a threat that was already 2 steps ahead. For the first time in decades, the Galactic Empire had lost the initiative. Vorak exhaled slowly. They are dismantling us. Dain Voss watched the after-action reports stream across the heads-up display. No wasted fire. No unnecessary casualties. A surgical dismantling of Imperial control. Taver Jin adjusted his stance. The Empire has begun rerouting forces to compensate for their losses. They're pulling fleets away from the central sectors. Dain's lips pressed into a thin line. Exactly as planned. He turned to Drellin Kane. Next target? Kane brought up the next strike zone. Outpost Relis 9. A key relay station. If taken down, it would blind the Empire's ability to coordinate counterstrikes. But something was off. Kane's fingers hesitated over the controls. Sir, new variable. The display flickered, shifting to long-range sensor feeds. The unidentified vessel had moved. It was closer now, still shadowing the anomaly, still pulsing with unknown energy. But now, it was scanning them. Taver frowned. That ship was ignoring us before. Dain's expression hardened. Now it isn't. The bridge fell silent, tension tightening like a coiled wire. The black ships were designed to avoid detection. Their technology surpassed anything the Empire had encountered. Yet this vessel had noticed them anyway. Kane studied the readings. No weapons charged, no aggression, just tracking us, Taver finished, his voice edged with caution. Dain weighed his options. This wasn't just an anomaly anymore. This was an unknown actor in an already high-stakes war. Maintain distance, he ordered. Do not engage, but keep every sensor locked on that ship. Taver hesitated. And if it makes a move? Dain's voice was unwavering. Then we see what it's really after. High Chancellor Vorak Thalen stared at the star map, his mind calculating in silence. The humans had struck hard. Their movements were coordinated, deliberate, but something else lurked beneath the chaos. Chancellor, an aide stepped forward cautiously. Intelligence reports indicate an unknown vessel near the human fleet's position. Vorak's gaze snapped to the new data. His fingers flexed. Not human, not Imperial, something else. The Chancellor's voice dropped. Do we have an identity? No, sir, but... The aide hesitated. It's interacting with an anomaly, a gravitational structure deep within uncharted space. Vorak exhaled. Pieces began falling into place. The human attacks were devastating, but they weren't the only unfolding disaster. This anomaly, this thing, was waking up, and whatever lurked beyond that veil would not care for human or Empire alike. The realization sank like a blade into Vorak's gut. This war has changed, he murmured, but the humans didn't know it yet. And if they woke it, if they unleashed it, there would be no Empire left to fight them. Dain Voss stood at the bridge, arms crossed, eyes locked on the unidentified vessel now hovering ominously near the anomaly. 45 hours left. The Empire thought humanity was their greatest threat. But in the shadow of something far older, far deadlier. Even Dain wasn't sure that was true anymore. Dain Voss remained motionless at the Resolute's bridge, watching the unidentified vessel as it drifted near the anomaly. Its presence was no longer passive. It had noticed them. And that changed everything. Admiral, Taver Jin spoke low, as if the vessel might somehow hear him. It's scanning us again. Pattern remains unreadable, but the frequency is shifting. Dain's gaze stayed locked on the laser plasma display. tracking the vessel's strange, rhythmic pulses. He didn't believe in coincidences. Could be an attempt at communication, Drellin Kane offered, running a secondary analysis. But if that's the case, who's the message really for? Before Dain could respond, a new transmission alert flashed across the heads-up display. This one wasn't from the unknown ship. It was Imperial encryption. Dain's fingers tightened. "Open the channel!" The screen flickered, revealing the cold reptilian visage of High Chancellor Vorak Thalen. The Chancellor's expression was unreadable, but there was no mockery this time. No arrogance. Only a thin, controlled tension. "Admiral Voss," Vorak said, his voice measured. "You have made your opening move. Impressive. Effective." Dain said nothing. Vorak leaned forward slightly. "But I am not calling to discuss the war. I am calling to warn you." A ripple of unease passed through the bridge. "Warn me." Dain's tone didn't shift, but his eyes stayed locked onto the Chancellor's. "That's interesting, considering you're the one losing." Vorak exhaled, slow and deliberate. "You assume victory because you dismantled a few colonies, because your fleet is moving unchecked. But Admiral, tell me, do you even know what that ship near your position is?" Dain didn't blink. "Should I?" A flicker of something, concern, passed over Vorak's expression. Kane exhaled, voice tight. "They're talking about the Empire." The Imperial War Council had already received the same warning, and for the first time in its long, ruthless reign, the Empire hesitated, because they had a choice now. Fight the humans, or stop something worse. Dain turned to his crew. 44 hours left. His eyes stayed locked on the Anomaly. "The real war hasn't even started yet." Dain Voss kept his gaze locked on the laser plasma display. The words from the unknown transmission still seared into the screen. "You must not awaken it." The bridge was silent. No one spoke, no one moved. The unidentified vessel hadn't left, it hadn't attacked, it had only warned, and that made it even more dangerous. Tavor Jin finally broke the silence. "They knew about the anomaly before we arrived. They've been waiting for someone to trigger it." Dain's fingers tightened on the console. "Then the question isn't what they want." His eyes flickered toward the outer perimeter of their fleet. "It's what they're waiting for." A tactical alert flared across the heads-up display. Incoming transmission. Imperial frequency. Dain exhaled. "Put them through." Vorak Thalen's reptilian face filled the screen, his usual composure strained beneath a layer of barely contained tension. "I gave you fair warning, Admiral," the High Chancellor said. "You ignored it." Dain leaned forward slightly. "You mistake strategy for ignorance, Chancellor. You're the one losing ground." Vorak's expression barely shifted, but the flicker of his pupils betrayed something close to frustration. "Then allow me to demonstrate why that is a mistake." The transmission cut out. At that moment, every Imperial ship in the sector vanished from long-range sensors. Tavor's head snapped toward Kane. "Where the hell did they go?" Kane's fingers moved rapidly across the interface, pulling up sensor overlays. "They're still here. They just..." He exhaled. "They've masked their signatures." Dain straightened. "That's impossible. The Empire's never deployed cloaking fields on this scale." Tavor swore under his breath. "Then either we're facing a new weapon, or they're using something old," Dain finished. His mind was already racing. The anomaly, the unidentified vessel, the Empire's sudden shift in tactics. Everything was connected. And if Vorak was willing to risk whatever was buried in that anomaly, then he wasn't bluffing about the stakes. The black ships moved into formation, scanning every sector of the anomaly's perimeter. The Empire's forces were invisible, but they were still there, somewhere. Dain's instincts screamed that they weren't waiting to engage in a traditional battle. They were setting a trap, And when the Empire laid a trap, it was never meant for capture. It was meant for eradication. Tavor's voice cut through the tension. New contact, they just... Before he could finish, the first explosion tore through the fleet. A shockwave rattled the Resolute, forcing Dain to steady himself against the console. Kane's hands flew across the controls. They're hitting our flanks, targeting our outermost ships first. Dain's mind locked onto one critical fact. This wasn't random. They're attacking from the gravitational pockets near the Anomaly, he realized. They're using the distortion fields to cover their approach. Tavor's eyes widened. They planned this days ago. Dain didn't hesitate. Pull all ships inward. Force them to engage closer to us. If they want a knife fight, we'll bring the blade to their throat. Tavor relayed the order. The black ships adjusted, closing ranks. Defensive fire raked across the void, but the Empire's cloaked fleet struck again, this time from below. The Harrow, one of their outer guard vessels, took a direct hit to its reactor bay. Fire tore through its hull. "Structural collapse detected," Kine shouted. Dain's response was instant. "Seal off non-essential decks. Evacuate the crew." The Harrow's captain, Jorek Sen, appeared on the comms, his face bloodied from an overhead rupture. "Admiral, we can't hold." Dain's expression hardened. "Get your men off that ship, Captain." Jorek hesitated, then gave a tight nod. "It was an honor, sir." The transmission cut as the Harrow detonated. Its wreckage spiraled outward, engulfing one of the unseen Imperial vessels in its blast. For the first time, the Empire had exposed itself. Tavor seized the opening. "We have visual confirmation on one of their ships, locking on target." Dain snapped the order. "Every available railgun, fire!" The Resolute's main cannons unleashed a full salvo, and the concealed Imperial warship flickered into view, its cloaking field struggling to compensate. Then, it shattered. The black ships followed suit, adjusting their fire to track heat emissions instead of visual data. One by one, the Ghost Fleet began to bleed, but the Empire wasn't finished. A second explosion erupted. This time, not from a black ship. It came from the Anomaly itself. Dain whipped toward Kane. "Report!" Kane's hands flew across the interface. "Massive energy fluctuation within the Anomaly. It's destabilizing." Tavor's jaw tightened. "They're forcing it open." Dain exhaled sharply. "That's why they masked their fleet. This entire engagement was a distraction." Kane's face turned grim. "Sir, if they've already activated the construct..." The laser plasma display flickered violently. Then a new signal burned across the screen. It wasn't Imperial. It wasn't human. It was the unidentified vessel. A transmission flooded their comms. Its words burned into every display. "You were warned." The Anomaly began pulling inward, collapsing in on itself. Dain barely had time to react. A new object was emerging, something that had been buried inside the Anomaly for longer than the Empire itself. Tavor's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Admiral, what the hell is that?" The bridge fell into stunned silence, because the thing that drifted free of the collapsing Anomaly wasn't a ship. It was something older, something built for war. Dain felt the shift in his gut. The war they had started against the Empire was no longer the only war being fought, because the thing that had just emerged wasn't here to pick sides. It was here to finish a war that had never truly ended. Dain turned to his crew. 43 hours left. His eyes stayed locked on the thing that had awakened. And now, we find out what we just unleashed. The Resolute's bridge was a storm of data streams and clipped commands. The laser plasma displays filled the room with sharp blue light, tracking every hostile movement. Dain Voss stood at the center, his gaze locked on the battlefield unfolding beyond the viewport. The Sentinel, its glowing core pulsing with incomprehensible energy, was no longer just an anomaly. It was a countdown to catastrophe. "Admiral, the energy surge is reaching critical levels." Taver Jin's voice cut through the tension. If we don't shut it down, it could consume this entire sector. Dain exhaled slowly. We need options. Drellin Kane, eyes locked onto the shifting energy signatures, muttered, We might not get another shot at this. His fingers worked over the console. I can calculate a targeted disruption, an overload to collapse it before it stabilizes completely. Dain nodded sharply. Do it, and get me a full scan of the Empire's fleet. They need to know what they're standing next to. Taver's expression darkened as new data flickered across his screen. They've repositioned. Half their forces are breaking away from the main fleet. They're getting ready to run. Dain's jaw tightened. They still think they can escape this. He turned to the comms officer. Open a direct channel to the Chancellor. The laser plasma display flickered before stabilizing, revealing High Chancellor Vorak Thielen. His reptilian features were tense, the usual arrogance drained from his eyes. Voss, Vorak growled, if you're calling for a surrender, you won't get one. Dain's tone was as sharp as cut glass. I don't care about your pride, Chancellor. That thing out there is about to turn this battlefield into a singularity. Vorak hesitated. His advisors murmured behind him, their panic barely concealed. What proof do you have? Dain stepped aside, letting Kane's data stream flood the Chancellor's screen. The numbers didn't lie. The Sentinel wasn't just waking up, it was expanding. A long silence followed. Then, what are your terms? Vorak's voice was measured, but the edge of desperation was unmistakable. Dain's expression didn't change. You will assist in shutting this down. Full fleet coordination. No sabotage, no miscalculations. Afterward, you will withdraw from our colonies. If you refuse, your entire armada dies here. Vorak's claws curled into fists. And if we help you, but refuse to leave afterward? Dain's voice was ice. Then you'll just be the next thing we take apart. The Chancellor bared his teeth, but he knew the truth. This was no longer a negotiation. It was survival. Fine, Vorak snapped. We'll work together. But once this is done, our war continues. Dain gave the slightest nod. That's tomorrow's problem. Right now, you have 10 minutes to move your ships into position before this thing decides for us. The transmission ended. The Empire's fleet and the black ships moved into formation, an uneasy, temporary alliance against a force neither side understood. EMP charges are set, Kane called out. But we need to detonate them at the exact moment the Sentinel's energy cycle peaks. If we miss the window, then we all get turned into atoms, Dain finished. Understood. We'll get it right the first time. The Sentinel's pulses increased in intensity, flickering between known physics and something else entirely. Something wrong. Space itself twisted at the edges of its energy field. Admiral, we're reaching the detonation window, Taver called. Dain's fingers tightened around the rail. All ships, prepare to fire. Wait for my mark. Seconds dragged into eternity. The Sentinel's glow intensified, the core pulling, stretching reality at the edges of its gravitational field. The readings on the displays spiked. Dain's heartbeat matched the countdown in his mind. Fire. Every ship in the makeshift fleet released its payload. EMP bursts, kinetic warheads, directed energy lances, all converging on a single point. For an agonizing moment, nothing happened. Then the Sentinel convulsed. Its structure shuddered, the energy field around it distorting wildly. The pulses stuttered, then collapsed inward, folding space upon itself in a flash of blinding light. The shock wave erupted outward, sending debris scattering in all directions. The ships reeled as artificial gravity struggled to compensate. Then, silence. The Sentinel was gone. Wreckage drifted, illuminated by distant starlight. Dain Voss stood in the bridge's dim glow, scanning the battlefield. Status? Kane exhaled. Minimal damage to our fleet. The Empire lost 3 ships in the blast radius, But the Sentinel is completely eradicated. Tavor leaned back in his chair, exhaustion clear in his features. We should be dead. Dain's gaze flicked to the laser plasma display. Vorak Thalen appeared once more, his expression unreadable. We have suffered greatly, Admiral, but today we faced a common enemy and prevailed. Dain nodded, his expression unreadable. Survival makes allies of us all, Chancellor. Vorak's gaze hardened. This alliance is temporary. Once we've licked our wounds, the war resumes. Dain's eyes narrowed. Then you'd better hope we don't find another Sentinel buried out there. The transmission ended. Tavor exhaled, glancing at Dain. So what now, Admiral? Dain turned to his crew, the weight of their losses evident in his voice. We regroup, repair, and prepare. The Empire remains our enemy, but we've seen there's more out here than our conflict. Kane stepped forward. Admiral, the unidentified vessel is still out there. It's been observing us this whole time. Dain's gaze shifted to the display, where the enigmatic ship hovered at the edge of their sensors. Open a channel. A moment passed before the vessel responded. The screen filled with unfamiliar symbols, slowly translating, "You have survived the first test. More will come." Tavor frowned. First test? What do they mean? Dain's expression hardened. It means our fight is far from over. We need to be ready for whatever comes next. In the cold void of space, amidst the remnants of battle, the Resolute and its fleet began the arduous process of recovery. The scars of the encounter with the Sentinel were deep, but the resolve of its crew was deeper. Dain Voss stood on the bridge, staring into the stars. The countdown continued in his mind, not just to the next engagement with the Empire, but to the unknown challenges that lay ahead. For in the depths of space, new threats awaited, and the true test of humanity's endurance was only beginning. The Resolute's bridge was a controlled chaos of voices and data streams. The Sentinel was gone, but the echoes of its destruction lingered. Wreckage drifted in silent arcs, remnants of a battlefield that had nearly consumed them all. Dain Voss stood motionless, his gaze locked onto the heads-up display, tracking the only ship still unaccounted for, the unidentified vessel. The alien craft had not fled. It lingered on the edges of the battlefield, watching, waiting. They're still there. Kane's voice was measured, but tension clung to the words. They've made no hostile moves, but they're not leaving either. Tavor Jin studied the signal feed. They called this the first test. He turned toward Dain. That means they're expecting a second. Dain exhaled through his nose, the weight of the words settling. A test. That implied intent, design, purpose. Someone or something had orchestrated this. Open a channel, Dain ordered. The screen flickered. Instead of a being, a string of symbols filled the laser plasma display, shifting and restructuring as the ship's systems translated. The message formed, "The warning was ignored. Now you have seen." A sharp silence followed. No explanation, no elaboration. "Seen what?" Dain demanded. "Who are you?" The symbols realigned, a new response forming. "You are not ready." Then the vessel moved. Not with thrusters, not with a warp signature. One moment it was there, the next, it wasn't. Kane's fingers moved over the controls. No trace of a jump signature, Admiral. They're just gone. Tavor rubbed his jaw. This wasn't a random encounter. They were waiting for this. Dain's thoughts churned. A test, a warning, but from whom? And more importantly, against what? The uneasy silence aboard the Resolute was soon broken. A new signal flashed across the comms relay. The Empire's fleet had regrouped. Tavor stiffened. Transmission incoming from the Empire. Put it through. The laser plasma display snapped into focus, revealing High Chancellor Vorak Thalen. His scales glistened under the artificial light, his expression unreadable. Your interference nearly cost us all, Admiral, Vorak said, his voice measured. You tampered with something beyond your understanding. Dain's jaw tightened. And yet, it was your empire that held the Sentinel in its archives. You knew about this. You knew, and did nothing. Vorak's eyes narrowed. We knew enough to leave it alone. That's more than I can say for you. Dain folded his arms. You think this is over? The Chancellor's silence was answer enough. You saw their message, Dain continued. That was only a test. Whatever's coming, your empire isn't ready for it either. Vorak's fingers curled against the edge of his throne. Perhaps. But that is not your concern. Our war is not finished. There it was. Dain's eyes flicked to Tavor. Status on their fleet? Tavor scanned the readout. Holding position. No aggressive maneuvers. Yet. Dain returned his focus to Vorak. You want to fight now? After everything? You barely made it out of that battle, Chancellor. Your forces are in shambles. Vorak's lip curled in a near snarl. And yet we still stand. Dain studied him. The pride was still there, but something else had seeped into the cracks. Fear, hesitation. The Sentinel had rattled them. Then leave, Dain said simply. You got your second chance. Don't waste it. Vorak's expression darkened. The Empire does not retreat. Dain's voice was cold. Then you'll be the next thing we take apart. The Chancellor held his gaze for a long moment. Then, without another word, the display cut out. Tavor exhaled. They're waiting for something. Dain nodded. We'll find out soon enough. Hours later, the fleet drifted in formation, patching wounds and recalibrating systems. Engineers worked around the clock, repairing damaged ships. Kane scrolled through a series of logs. We lost 3 black ships in the Sentinel's collapse. 17 more sustained heavy damage. We can rebuild, but we need time. Dain stared at the fleet status. Time was a luxury they might not have. Tavor approached. Admiral, what if that alien ship was right? Dain looked at him. What if we aren't ready for whatever comes next? Dain's voice was low. Then we get ready. Tavor hesitated. And if it's something we can't stop? Dain's expression didn't change. Then we make sure it knows what kind of fight it started. He turned to the crew. We're not going anywhere. Set a course for the next Anomaly site. If there's more of these things buried across the galaxy, I want to find them before something else does. Kane raised an eyebrow. We're taking the fight to them? Dain's voice was iron. We don't wait for threats to come knocking. We make sure they never get the chance. Tavor cracked a small grin. Sounds like a plan. The Resolute's engines flared. The fleet adjusted course. The war with the Empire would continue. But now, a greater war loomed beyond the edges of known space, and Dain Voss intended to meet it head-on. The Resolute surged forward, leading the fleet toward the next Anomaly site. The wreckage of the Sentinel still drifted in its wake, but Dain Voss had already set his sights on what lay ahead. In the war room, the laser plasma display flickered with mapped coordinates, marking the location of the second construct. The unknown vessel had vanished, leaving behind its cryptic warning. We are not ready. Dain had no intention of waiting to find out what that meant. Tavor Jin studied the data, his fingers gliding over the controls. The site's deep in the rift zone, high levels of subspace distortion. That could mean gravitational anomalies, or something worse. Dain exhaled sharply. Then we proceed with caution. Kane tapped on the heads-up display, pulling up an intercepted transmission. The Empire's moving, Admiral. They're not falling back anymore. We're picking up fleet mobilization patterns, multiple battle groups repositioning. Dain narrowed his eyes. Where? A new projection flickered onto the display. The Empire's forces weren't retreating. They were advancing. Tavor stiffened. They're setting up a blockade between us and the Anomaly. Dain's jaw tightened. They're not just defending. They're trying to claim it first. The war hadn't ended. It had only shifted into a new phase. On the bridge of the Empire's flagship, High Chancellor Vorak Thelen watched the heads-up display with a silent scowl. Reports streamed in from his fleet commanders. The humans had changed tactics, no longer acting in defense, no longer merely resisting. They were expanding. A subordinate approached, bowing slightly. "Chancellor, the blockade is in position. The humans will not reach the construct before us." Vorak's fingers curled against the armrest. "Number, but they will not stop coming." He had seen it in Admiral Voss's eyes, a certainty that rattled him more than he cared to admit. Another officer hesitated before speaking. "High Chancellor, there is something else." Vorak's gaze sharpened. "Say it." The officer hesitated. "The disturbance we detected at the first anomaly, it's happening again. The energy readings are rising. The construct may be awakening." A chill swept through the command deck. The Sentinel had nearly destroyed them all. What if this one was worse? Vorak rose from his seat. "Hold position. No one approaches the construct, not until we understand what we're dealing with." The officer hesitated. "And the humans?" Vorak's eyes darkened. "We stall them, whatever it takes." Back aboard the Resolute, the countdown had begun. Dain studied the blockade's layout on the war room display. The Empire's fleet had layered their defenses, forcing any approaching ships into a narrow corridor of concentrated fire. Kane's analysis was grim. "No clean way through, Admiral. They've fortified every weak point. They're digging in." Dain's gaze swept across the table. "Then we force them to move." Tavor's eyes flickered with understanding. "A feint." Dain nodded. "We stage an assault here." He highlighted a sector on the edge of the blockade, force them to shift resources. When they reposition, we exploit the gap. Kane frowned. "It won't hold long. The moment they realize it's a distraction, we'll already be through." No one argued. They all knew the risk. Dain straightened. "We deploy in 20 minutes. Make sure they see us coming." The black ships moved first, silent hunters emerging from the dark. Disruptor volleys carved into the Empire's forward ranks, forcing enemy formations to shift. Turrets locked onto false targets, chasing shadows while the real strike force prepared. Dain watched the battle unfold from the bridge. The trap had been set. Now, they had to spring it. Tavor relayed an update. "They've pulled ships from the center formation, just as planned." Dain wasted no time. "Now, all ships, punch through." The Resolute surged forward, followed by a wave of human warships. Railguns thundered. Disruptor beams sliced through the dark. Enemy shields buckled under the sudden pressure. A path had been carved. Kane called out, "We have a window! 30 seconds before they regroup." Dain's grip tightened on the console. "Then we don't waste it." One by one, the ships slipped through the breach. A heartbeat later, the Empire's forces closed the gap behind them. Tavor exhaled. "We're in." Dain didn't let himself relax. The blockade had been breached, but the real threat lay ahead. As the fleet approached the Anomaly, warning lights flared across the bridge. Kane's voice was urgent. "We're picking up a massive energy buildup. It's—" A shockwave ripped through the sector. Ships lurched violently as a gravity surge rolled outward from the Anomaly's core. Static crackled over the comms, systems momentarily scrambling. Dain braced himself. "Status!" Tavor fought the controls. "Power fluctuations across all ships. Shields at 70%. Kane paled. "Admiral, look at the Anomaly." Dain turned to the display. The construct was no longer dormant. The swirling mass of energy at its heart had begun to unravel, forming a spiraling rift in space itself, and something was coming through. Dain's throat tightened. They weren't the first ones here, and they wouldn't be the last. Tavor's hands flew over the controls. "It's accelerating. Whatever's inside, it's—" A second pulse erupted. disrupting sensors. On-screen distortions blurred the space ahead, bending light like liquid. Then the signal returned. Kane's voice was hollow. "Admiral, we have incoming vessels." Dain's stomach turned cold. Not from the Empire, not from any known faction. The Anomaly had answered. Tavor exhaled sharply. "Sir, we've got company." Dain's eyes locked onto the sensor feed. Silhouettes emerged from the rift, dark, angular ships with no markings, no known transponder codes. Their formation was tight, their approach deliberate. Kane's voice wavered. They were waiting for this moment. Dain's fingers curled into a fist. "Then we show them they weren't the only ones." The Resolute adjusted course, weapons powering up. The fleet followed suit, forming battle lines. For the first time since the war had begun, they weren't fighting the Empire. Something far older had just stepped onto the battlefield, and the countdown hadn't ended. The Resolute adjusted course, locking into formation with the fleet. The alien ships that had emerged from the rift weren't hesitating. They were advancing. Dain Voss stood at the center of the bridge, eyes fixed on the heads-up display. The unknown vessels moved with chilling efficiency, dark silhouettes against the shifting distortion of the Anomaly. Kane's voice was steady, but his words carried weight. "They're not broadcasting. No communication, no transponders. Nothing." Tavor Jin studied the data streams, fingers moving rapidly over the controls. "They knew we'd come. They were waiting for someone to unlock this thing." Dain clenched his jaw. "Then we made a mistake." He turned to his officers, his voice unwavering. "We end it. Now." The black ships opened fire first. Railguns unleashed tungsten rounds at near-relativistic speeds, shattering the silence of deep space. Impact after impact carved into the unknown vessels, but they barely faltered. Instead, they adapted. Energy pulses erupted from their hulls, shifting like living weapons. The first blasts struck an escort ship, tearing through its shields as if they were vapor. The crew braced as the Resolute's deck trembled. Kane's voice rang out. "They're weapons! Phased energy bursts! It's bypassing conventional shielding!" Dain's grip tightened on the console. "Then we don't let them hit us." Tavor's eyes locked onto the Anomaly's pulse patterns. "Admiral, we can use the gravitational shifts against them. If we time our maneuvers—" Dain didn't need to hear more. "Execute." The Resolute veered sharply, weaving through the distortions. The fleet followed suit, darting between unstable gravity pockets as enemy fire slashed through empty space. But the alien ships weren't just attacking, they were moving toward the Anomaly. Kane's gaze sharpened. "They're not here for us. They're completing whatever process we interrupted." Dain's stomach twisted. "Then we stop them." The black ships pressed forward, unleashing another wave of fire. Every shot counted. Every maneuver was survival. The alien vessels began shifting their formation, synchronizing with the pulses of the Anomaly. Tavor's face darkened as he read the updated telemetry. "They're activating something." Dain's voice cut through the noise. "Focus all fire on their lead ship. Break their pattern." The Resolute let loose a full salvo. Railgun rounds slammed into the lead vessel, rupturing its hull in a spray of liquid-like metal. The energy within it flickered, then collapsed inward. The Anomaly surged in response. The ripple that followed sent shockwaves across the battlefield. Kane steadied himself. "We need to pull back. Now." Dain's eyes flicked to the Anomaly. It was shrinking, collapsing, or worse, resetting. The comms crackled. An unexpected transmission cut through the static, the Empire's flagship. Vorak Thalen's face appeared on the laser plasma display, his expression unreadable. "You've done enough damage, Admiral." Dain didn't flinch. "You're still here, Chancellor." Vorak's gaze flicked toward the Anomaly. He understood what was happening. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Vorak exhaled. We both know what must be done. Dain met his stare. He did. The only way to stop it was to destroy everything involved, including every ship inside the distortion field. That included the Empire's forces. That included Dain's fleet. Vorak's voice was quieter this time. A truce for the next 10 minutes. Dain Voss had never trusted the Empire, but in that moment he saw something he hadn't expected: sincerity. He gave a sharp nod. Agreed. The transmission cut. Dain turned to his officers. All ships, full firepower, target the Anomaly. The Black ships and Empire's fleet fired in unison. Railguns, disruptors, plasma lances, every weapon concentrated on the heart of the Anomaly. The alien ships retaliated, but they were too late. The construct pulsed violently, its energy destabilizing. The rift began to tear apart. Tavor's voice rang out. "It's breaking apart! Gravitational field collapsing!" Dain braced himself. "Pull the fleet back! Now!" One by one, the ships peeled away, engines burning hot as they raced from the implosion. The alien vessels tried to escape, but the Anomaly dragged them back in. Their forms twisted, stretched, and then vanished. The Resolute surged ahead, shields straining against the blast wave. For a moment, nothing existed except fire and fury. Then, silence. The Anomaly was gone. The construct was no more. The fleet reassembled, damage reports flooding in. But they had survived. On the Empire's flagship, Vorak Thalen watched the heads-up display, expression unreadable. A subordinate spoke cautiously. "Orders, Chancellor?" Vorak was silent for a long moment. Then he exhaled. "We withdraw." His officers stiffened. "Sir?" He didn't repeat himself. There was nothing left to fight over. Aboard the Resolute, the crew gathered in silence. The war room felt different now. Lighter. Heavier. Dain stood before the fleet-wide transmission channel. His final message. He spoke, his voice steady. "The war is over. You will not return to our colonies. You will not reclaim what you lost." A pause. "And if you try, there will be no countdown next time." The transmission cut. Dain exhaled, turning from the display. The battle was won. Humanity had survived. Tavor smirked slightly. "Think they got the message?" Dain's lips quirked. "They will." And with that, the war was done. Humanity had risen, and the Galactic Empire would never forget it.